Did you have a nice lunch? Did you overeat like I did? Because I did. It was delicious. They're very kind. And it's a little chilly out there, isn't it? And funny weather. Funny weather we're having in May. Yeah. Usually it's, sunny and blue every day here. So it's interesting and it's kind of nice actually. It's like East Coast weather. It's okay, Larry. We're just a minute early. Just asking people how their lunches were. No problem. And it's very nice. We have Sangeeta is here from a Sikh community, a Sikh priestess, right?
Or a minister of Sikh Dharma.
A minister of Sikh Dharma from way up north around Yuba City, is it? There's quite a large Sikh community up there, and very kind of her to come down and join us. So thank you so much for being here. I do a lot of interfaith work, so I'm always so appreciative when we visit each other's places and centers and temples, and I like to go to the other traditions and go to church or go to something like that. It's really nice. It's a great way to connect the world, because you have this idea that they're other, I don't know what, people see me and they're like, what is that? What is going on there? I live in a conservative community outside Philadelphia. So I'm the only one looking like this where I live. There is not a community, and it can be tricky. People stare and they kind of aren't sure, and sometimes they're a little hostile. I did most of my Dharma here in California, where it's a very open, welcoming, open-minded place. So it was kind of different turning up there and a little bit sometimes getting a little negative remark from somebody. It doesn't happen a lot. And if you smile, like His Holiness says, you just smile genuinely, and then that kind of disarms people pretty quickly. But it is interesting. So we have a very nice interfaith group in the area I'm in, and they're very welcoming. And churches, mostly it's churches, synagogues, and there's, I think, one imam that comes from a Muslim community, and that's about it. So, because there's just not a lot of diversity in that area. But it's very nice, and they're wonderful people. And then through that, there's another group that we connected to that is a suburban group that's merged with an urban group. So there's a small impoverished city near where I live called Chester, Pennsylvania. It's a very poor, challenged area. And so there's a group called FUSE, Fellowship of Urban Suburban Engagement. It's wonderful. So we got together. They have all kinds of things they do, such as, I'm going to call it, I think it's called job banking. You may have heard of, but what they do is, if you're a carpenter and I'm a fundraiser, let's say, which is my past, like that, and so you can come to, like, I might be invited to go to somebody's community to give a free fundraising talk because our community needs some carpentry help, and we trade. So you can put your skills, you list your skills in this thing, there's people that manage it, and then they kind of network who needs help, and it's a wonderful, wonderful way also to share skills and then get to know people. And then we do some work of cleaning up certain communities of areas that need that. But what we started to do was meet to just talk about diversity and talk about some of the issues between our communities, because the suburban community is predominantly white. Chester is predominantly black. And so, or African American. And so we met, and the first time I think there were 30 people maybe that showed up for an evening with some refreshments, but to dialogue, just to start a dialogue. We didn't have an intention we're going to do something, just to start talking. And then we met the next month with 50 people, and then the last time I went there were 80. So what we do is we break up at tables, and then we have a topic to discuss. And the tables are all mixed, different people, and then we'll meet back at the end to talk about highlights of what surprised us. And then from it, what they're trying to do is just get you to make a new friend of somebody that I wouldn't normally come across from my suburban community. And it's been really, it's been a wonderful thing. You know, I wish there's more that all of us could do along those lines, you know, because you tend to end up in your own bubble like that. That's interesting and lovely to see some old friends here. Very old friends and lovely, I should say long-term, not old. Long-term friends. Friends that go way back. You go way back with. Like that. Okay. So thank you again for being here. So this is a perfect opportunity. We try. I'm here. I had lunch. And now it's like, let me reestablish my motivation again. So just take a moment. You can close your eyes a little bit. Put your mind, again, you're directing your mind into that positive space, if you can. And just rekindle that motivation. You can allow the mind to settle on the breath for a moment, just to relax your thoughts and let the distraction go. So you can hopefully be more focused, more attentive, with this idea of fully waking up, reaching our full potential as a human by becoming a Buddha, fully awakened being, as then we're completely unlimited in benefiting all others. So it's with that intention that we are here right now to conduct the rest of our program. Thank you. So you can relax, open your eyes. We were talking about self-compassion, self-caring. And so what happens is when we lack that, when we skip that, you get the idea of low self-esteem, self-hatred, self-loathing can come from that. It's, you know, in some ways, the self-hatred is rooted in a similar self-caring instinct, okay, because it's directed to the self, but it's basically, you know, I don't really care about myself, you know. And sometimes it can come from caring a lot about yourself, but being unable to accept or forgive your imperfections, your flaws, the fact that we're basically broken fundamentally like that. So, and then the other thing is you end up with lack of self-compassion. We see it in many, many forms. So people stay in abusive relationships. People have eating disorders because of a lack of self-care. They neglect personal needs. They lash out at others, criticize. They feel anxious. They feel depressed. All of this from a lack of self-caring, a lack of self-caring. Codependency comes from a lack of self-caring, being a codependent or an enabler. So some people feel if you're a bodhisattva and the premise of your life is to become a Buddha, to benefit all others, and you live by a motto of cherishing others more than yourself, people think it's okay then to be a codependent, which means you are allowing someone to continue and perpetuate unhealthy behavior, okay, because it fulfills a need in me. That's the problem, is it has a need in me. Bodhisattvas don't have the need in themselves. Okay? So I have had friends, they live with an alcoholic, but it's okay. He only has a couple of beers a day. It's okay. So they live with this person, allowing them to drink, perpetuate the negative behavior, right? Because it identifies them as the caregiver. Then they're needed. Okay? So those things are unhealthy. Staying in an abusive relationship, okay, indicates a lack of your own self-worth. It's different if you're very clear about boundaries, and bodhisattvas set healthy boundaries. They set healthy boundaries. My teachers set boundaries. When they decide to talk during the day, when they have appointments, when they're available. Many teachers do that. Western teachers do that. Okay, so that they have some resources to continue to give and not be so shredded. So it's very important to do that for yourself. Figure out what self-caring is to you. What do you like that nourishes you and renews you? So for me, I like to do some solitary retreat every year. It's really important to me. Sometimes I don't find the time, but I really try to more and more eke out that time, because I just find sometimes I just need to go in quietly without any other disturbance to renew the resources, to kind of find like, okay, more energy, things like that. So sometimes even in a class like today, you know, I might have some time to mix with the students, and then I just chose to eat the meal. They put this thing up for the teachers to eat separately, because sometimes I'm trying to eat and people are asking all these questions. So it's very hard to get a little bit of space, you know, to go out for a walk just to clear the mind, think about what I want to talk about this afternoon. It can be really helpful. So figure out your methods. Is it that you enjoy taking a bath quietly, and, you know, light a candle, have it, you know, slowly? Physical recreation renews people. Listening to nice music may renew people. Having a quiet meal, maybe having some time alone. So it's important to find those things. Be skillful about it. Eating a box of chocolates probably isn't that renewing. You know, so again, you might say, but I like to do that, but is that really a beneficial? You have to add some benefit that afterwards you feel, oh, I got a little space, like that. Okay? It's different than treats, different than a treat. So I want to talk about something just to think about. This is from Jimpa's book. I think he quotes, there's a psychologist, Kristen Neff. She's a systematic scientific approach to self-compassion. Okay? And she relates it to 3 categories. Self-kindness. This is the way we practice self-compassion, through self-kindness, through common humanity, and mindfulness. And she explains self-kindness as relating to our shortcomings and our limitations, again, with kindness, understanding, and acceptance. We've talked about that before. I added patience before. Same. Self-kindness is I kind of, you know I can't do everything. You know, it's very sweet because the only reason I teach is because the centers would request. I get a lot of requests. I'm not able to honor all the requests right now. And I have some other responsibilities. So it's, again, I really like to do that. There's all these retreats I'd like to go on this year. There's all these great programs. I can't do it. You can't do it all. Okay, so I acknowledge that, and I think try to determine what is the most beneficial way for me to manifest. Then through what activities, okay, with some patience with myself, understanding, can't do it all, kindness, doing my best, like that. I accept that about myself. And I don't stay in it with a negative judgment about myself. So she talks about self-kindness. Okay. Then she says common humanity is how we perceive our problems and suffering within the context, again, here are these words, the shared human experience. Common humanity. How I look at my problems. When you have a problem, do you ever consider the world around you? Or is it just me, myself, and I again? What else is going on? Do other people have these problems? You know, did I ever think about when my neighbor had the problem? I never really considered that. Now I have the problem. Oh, well, that opens you up. So that's a kind of interesting dynamic. Number 3, mindfulness is the ability to hold painful experiences with awareness. Okay, with awareness. Okay, instead of, you ready for this? Over-identifying with them through obsessive thinking or desperately trying to fix them. Okay, we are a fixing culture. We are a fixing culture. We want to fix it. Somebody comes to you with a problem. So this is, I find a fantastic way. I had this issue. People would come to me with a problem. Well, we got to do something about it. Immediately I was like, we got to fix it. But sometimes they just wanted you to listen. And sometimes there's no way to fix it. There's no way to fix it. Then what? Can I allow myself to just be present? And can I notice that if they're having a problem and I've determined it's not fixable, can I, with empathy, be there with their pain and their discomfort? It's a huge handle of friendship to do that with people. Of your humanity, of your humanness, to connect with somebody, to just be there for them, just be present. We're so uncomfortable with that as a culture. We're constantly dwelling in the past, what could have been, what should have been, and now I'm in the future. What's coming next? What am I going to do next week? The vacation, I got to do this, I got to do that. What about this moment right here? I know many people, they wake up and the lists have mowed them down before they get out of bed. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I forgot to call the thing, I need to do the thing. Give yourself some space, please. You deserve it. You deserve it. You'll be so much happier. So look at the mind that wants to fix. Just mindful. Mindfulness is I'm just attending to it with my thoughts. I'm just being aware. It doesn't mean you have to do anything. So she gives you some statements. Just relate to these. Look at these. Reflect on these. Would you agree or disagree with the following statements that relate to these three categories? Self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Okay, related to self-care things. Could wake you up a little bit of, okay, agree or disagree. You could even think in your mind strongly, somewhat strongly, not at all. Okay, related to self-kindness. I try to be understanding and patient toward those aspects of my personality I don't like. Is that you? Okay, I try to be understanding and patient toward those aspects of my personality I don't like. How's that going for you, right? Okay. Here's another one. When I'm going through a very hard time, and I just want to ask all of you, what do you do when you're going through a hard time? What are your coping mechanisms? Anybody? What do you do, honestly? Be honest. This is how you get real with yourself. Okay, you got to wake up to look at these things. What do I do? Yes.
Watch movies.
Watch movies, yeah. Don't we watch movies and turn the TV on? Little temporary relief. Basically a little temporary exit from my problem. We eat. We get physical exercise. We hang out with family and friends. They're all temporary relief like that. So it's interesting. So when I'm going through a hard time, I give myself the caring and tenderness I need. Do you? Right? It's interesting, isn't it? I give myself the caring and tenderness I need. It may not be the TV. For me, that's not tenderness and caring, putting the TV on. For me, but that's my experience. I'm going to choose something else. I'm a bath person. I'll get in the bath, soak. But to know your thing so that I know it's a little bit like, I need a breather, I need a break. My walk, lunch. I'm just going to have walk, recite some mantras. So it's very interesting for you to yourself, please be honest, to start to engage with what am I doing? Am I doing it? Am I doing some good self-caring things, or I don't even have the faintest idea what to do? Explore. You can explore and try things. I used to think having an ice cream cone, that was self-caring. I love ice cream. I love ice cream. It doesn't love me. So now I've already developed a thing where I just get indigestion. So now I have a thing where I see ice cream. So there's still the old trigger from childhood of, but I know anymore. I don't really feel great eating ice cream. Once in a while I'll have ice cream. But so it's not the source of my happiness. It's a little treat, but I'm not going to, so if I have problems arising, I'm not going to go for ice cream because I know that's not really going to do it for me. I used to think it did, but it didn't really help. Physical exercise would help me more. Go out for a walk. Clears the mind. Just look at nature, look at your neighbor's flowers, and I like that. Just gets me out of the ruminating thoughts. Okay, here's some related to common humanity. When I feel inadequate in some way, I try to remind myself that feelings of inadequacy are shared by most people. Oh, right. That's what we think, right? Right? But think about it. It's a neat one. We have stuff where you start going downhill and Suddenly I'm blaming myself. I'm not good enough. I messed up. I messed up. I messed up. Nobody else messes up. But again, we sit in the mind. Me, myself, and I is the most dominant thing in our experience, and I stay there. And I forget that other people are just as challenged. Once I think about them, this has a tendency to open up. Here's another common humanity. When things are going badly for me, I see the difficulties as part of life that everyone goes through. Right? Some people do, some not. Right? Here's related to mindfulness. I love this one. And there's another one, another writer that also talks about this. When when I'm feeling down, I try to approach my feelings with fill in the blank. When I am feeling down, I try to approach my feelings with what kind of experiences would you say for yourself? What comes up for you when you're feeling down? What's your attitude to yourself? What's your attitude to your problems? Any words come up? Dislike. Judgment. Judgmental. Yep. Maybe vulnerability. Maybe fear. Right? All these kind of heavy words, okay? So here, this is mindfulness with self-caring. Self-compassion. When I'm feeling down, I try to approach my feelings with curiosity and openness. Right? You may get creative. Think about it. Curiosity and openness. How refreshing. I just went through a trajectory of that. I had a thing come up in my life, and then suddenly I had a bit of panic and gripping, and then it manifested in my body. So interesting. It went right to my body, and I was like, whoa. And I knew it was my mind. I went, well, isn't that interesting? A little slice of that, you know. So then I hung with my panic for a while, just observing, like, what am I going to do with this? This is what it is. I can label it. I had some humor around it, but I couldn't get rid of it. It was just seemed to be, I'd go to sleep at night, I'd wake up with it, you know, and then it changed. I mean, my mind changed. I kind of worked on it and said, this isn't helpful. This is not helpful. So then shifting my perspective on it, and I got to this place I really was like curious and open. I wonder how it's going to go. Wonder where this problem is going. Then it really shifts. So it's a great way to approach problems, curiosity and openness, instead of the heavy negative, okay? Here's a last one. When I fail at something important to me, I know you all do this. I try to keep things in perspective. Right? Yes, we all do that. Okay, so it's very helpful. Again, you make a mistake, you're flat on your face. I know it's uncomfortable, but we're all in it together. We all do that. We've all been there. We're all broken. We've all failed. We've all given up. We've all quit. I pick myself up. I acknowledge that. Here I am. Acknowledge it. Find some self-caring modes that work for you. Get the messages from it, the lessons, and off we go. Helpful self-compassion. So think about it. There's many things you can do. Very, very helpful. It's the planet needs you to kind of do this now. It's our responsibility. Like that. Oh, I thought I turned it off. Sorry. Anyway, it'll stop soon. Okay. So self-compassion does renew your resources tremendously. Okay. And I also want to talk about the word I mentioned. How do I find a courageous thing? How do I move from fear to courage? So I want to talk about the word vulnerability when we're talking about compassion, empathy, and then we are going to later move into emptiness. Vulnerability. We have this word in our culture, vulnerability, that sounds negative. And when you say vulnerability to people, it seems as if it's not okay. And it brings up the words of the idea of weakness, fear, things like that, gripping, closing, things. So some of you have read Brené Brown. probably a sociologist, Brené Brown, talks about vulnerability a lot in her own trajectory of failing, picking herself up, getting creative, being curious, being open. So she says actually vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Very different than what we think of as normal vulnerability. Innovation, creativity, and change. Something's not working the way it used to. It brings up some fear. So you need to change some kind of pattern. You need to change a pattern. If the system's not working this way, what are you going to do? Keep forcing and doing? It's not going to work. So innovation, creativity, and change, fantastic. What happens is a lot of us are not comfortable with change. Not so comfortable with change. So it's nice to reflect a little bit on your relationship with change, starting with small changes, experiment, rehearse, get better with small changes, so that then I can start to look at the bigger changes in my life. So compassion takes, as Pema Chodron said, it's daring, it takes a lot of courage. Courage, number one, to care for ourselves, take care of yourself, to make decisions in our best interest, and not let our fear of what other people think throw us off course. Okay? So it also takes courage to care what people think, to have compassion. So in a sense, to care so that I am practicing good behavior and not upsetting their minds. That's the way we might care. But you're not going to care about what everybody thinks about you as long as you know you're in the center doing the right thing. I'm not going to worry then what other people think if I'm doing the right thing. If I know I am grounded in my practice of following the advice that I've learned and studied, and then I'm not going to be swayed by what other people think. Everybody has judgments and stuff that comes from a limited experience. Do they know my mind? Do they know my intention? You know, I will check in, though, if I feel like I'm off center and I've got a close friend that may feed back to me. I'm going to pay attention and listen to that. But when you're in sync and you know when you've slipped out, and when you slip out, you need some support from yourself and from others, and then to get you back in sync. And when you are in sync, continue. It's fantastic. Like that. So also finding a trusting, supportive community around you that can give you adequate feedback when you need it and support you and celebrate when things are going well. It's really important. So you do need this kind of courage to let go the other opinions of others. I find that living where I'm living right now, and I say it's a conservative area, but I've made friends in the area. I don't mind going. I go out like this. I smile at people. There's a lot of different people there. No problem. So it's like I have the sense of, somewhat of the strength, the courage to do that. I'm comfortable with that now. I've been so alone going around the planet mostly for years. So I'm comfortable. Like, that's okay. It doesn't bother me anymore. Going to the movies alone, having a meal alone. Doesn't bother me in the least. I'm okay with myself doing that. Some people I know have never done that. So the thought of it, and then they lose a partner 30, 40 years, and it's terrifying. They can't do anything alone. Don't want to go out alone. Don't have any experience of it. Right? So think about that you always have to be with somebody else all the time. Right? It's difficult. It can be difficult. So I also want to talk about I want to talk about the traditional aspect of developing bodhichitta and how we do that. The traditional methods to develop bodhichitta in Tibetan Buddhism. Many of you are familiar with this, some are not. There's two main methods to develop this altruistic mindset that is all about cherishing others more than yourself. There was a more public approach that's called the 6-point cause and effect method that came from Master Serlingpa, who lived in Indonesia. Master Serlingpa has been reincarnated, and he now, in this modern age, has reincarnated as Dagri Rinpoche, who comes to visit our centers. He's around my age, and he lives at His Holiness's palace in Dharamsala, India, and he travels, and he will be in California, I believe, this summer. He's coming. So the reincarnation of Master Sri-Lingpa. 6-point cause and effect method. The other method, and these originally came from the Buddha, passed down through these masters, from Master Shantideva, the equalizing and exchanging self with others. So in expanding our compassion, our empathy, what is a more traditional approach? How do I manifest that in my mind, which is a very effective method? So 6-point cause and effect, and both of these methods, I will say, have a practice called equanimity. Equanimity. Equanimity is equal regard, equal respect for all beings, whether they harm you or help you. Equal regard, equal respect for all beings. So equanimity, traditionally you may do a meditation called friend, enemy, stranger. And you're identifying all the nice feelings you have for the friend, all the horrible feelings for the enemy, person you don't like, who's challenging. Stranger, not much of a feeling either way. What's interesting is some of you have had partners, and when you first met, you didn't get along, correct? Anybody have a partner? That was my last partner. Some people have had a partner they divorce or break up with, maybe they had kids with, right? And they never want to see the person again. So there's your category friend, and suddenly it moves. And then before you made the friend, they're in a stranger category. I didn't know them. You can almost go back to the first time hello, how are you? You're introduced. Stranger, then you like them, they go over here. Something happens you don't like, some conflict, they're over here. It's like that. And the stranger could become a friend. The enemy could become a friend. It's all possible, all interchangeable. Based on the fundamental thing is we all have Buddha nature. We all want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. We're all the same in that regard. Okay? I remember my last boyfriend before I was ordained, the person I was ordained with. And when I met him, I had just moved to Vajrapani as the director. He was interviewing to come and work for us. So the current director said, you need to meet him because he's going to be working for you. So can you meet at this restaurant to interview? And I didn't want to go to the center. I didn't want to be the director. Like reluctantly, I was like, I have to meet him. So I met him at this restaurant, and it was he was a stranger. I was like, nothing much. And then we hired him, right? No great feeling one way or another. And we hired him to work part-time. And the first 4 months he was there, he had another job because he only worked part-time. And we didn't pay much. So he had another job. So what happened is that job took a priority because they paid him more. Right? He had more a little bit. So I didn't know when he showed up. He wouldn't call. He was going to be late. People were looking for him. Where is he? I thought you hired somebody. So he was a pain in the butt. So suddenly he went from stranger a little bit into the enemy category. 4 months later, it changed. Some karma ripens, and suddenly he's over in the friend category. We're kind of attracted to each other. You have that little ding. And it changes. Why? I don't know. I over-embellished his qualities. Right? That's what was going on. Okay? Then you go through the relationship, then it changes again. Then at some point, became a little bit of a pain. Then, then we got ordained. Okay, that was great. That was, like I said, best way to break up. Okay, it was great. So then I was in retreat at Vajrapani after I finished being director. They were very kind to let me do 7 months retreat as a little offering. Very kind. It was a big offering, actually. So I did all these meditations on the Lam Rim over the course of the months, and friend, enemy, stranger sometimes. And I just so happened to use a woman who was a stranger as my stranger from our local health food store in town. I only knew her first name, Lisa. I didn't know much else about her. I didn't have an opinion about her either way, but Lisa. So I just somehow popped her in as my stranger. I knew what she looked like. And I do this meditation different times, over and over and over, different times. So what happens is when I finished the retreat 7 months later, I went into town, I went to the health food store. There in one of the aisles is Lisa, right? Well, now I see her and I'm all excited to see her because I've been in this, doing meditations with her. She doesn't know that, I certainly wasn't going to tell her that, but she became a friend. Like for me, I was suddenly down the aisle and I see her and I walk down the aisle. I mean, when I think about it, you come out of retreat, you're in a totally different space. I come down the aisle and I went, Lisa? I was so excited to see her. So, and she's like disarmed. She's like, I'm still a stranger to her. Like she knows, she's seen me in the store, but she doesn't know me. She doesn't even, so I see her kind of like, yeah. And then I realized, I was like, oh, I need to kind of, so then I just said, oh, hi, it's nice to see you again, and then she said, oh yeah, I haven't seen you in a while. And I'm like, well, I've seen you, my meditations, I didn't say that, but I was embarrassed to say that. But so it's very interesting when you do these meditations, how some things shift for me. I had this really positive outlook about her. And okay, so equanimity, fantastic regard like that. And it's very helpful to deflect the judgments and the, that you never know of like what about somebody's experience, and that we're the same in wanting happiness and not wanting to suffer. So built on this, you have the first point in the 6-point cause and effect is all beings have been your mother. All beings have been your mother. This is the hardest point to realize. So this takes into consideration of the nature, the beginningless nature of mind, of your mind. There's no beginning, there's no end to your mind. Very hard for linear thinkers to acknowledge that. We're not used to thinking that way. What does that mean? Okay? So the mind is made up of moments of consciousness, moments of mind. And if you slowly start to understand the nature of mind, which is clear and knowing, that's the nature of our mind, just two qualities. A clear luminosity that is aware of things. That's your mind. But it is made up of moments of mind, and we can track the grosser levels of our mind. The mind exists on a gross level, a subtle level, and a most subtle level. So the gross levels of mind, you could track, for instance, how you got into your seat initially when we started the class from the doorway. And you could track back, which is made up of activities of the body. It's also made up of thoughts in your mind of how I got into the chair. So if you go back to the door, track yourself back to there, you'll notice that every moment of mind that dictated an activity had a moment of mind that preceded it, that caused it. There's always a preceding cause. There's always a preceding cause. You didn't just sit down in the chair. I was first standing in a position to sit down that was dictated by a moment of consciousness that told my brain to put my body in a certain position. That was preceded by a moment that caused it, of me moving into that position. Preceded by a moment that got me over to that position. Preceded by a moment that caused it, of me moving my muscles in a certain way. Caused by the moment before it that had me moving over into that spot. Caused by an initial thing when you came around the doorway, selecting a seat. Caused by the moment before when I walked in, when I took off my shoes. So you start to trace, there's a connectivity. And every moment is preceded by a moment that caused it. Preceded by a moment that caused it. And you say, well, the first cause must have been my conception. Sperm and egg come together, fertilization takes place. Sperm and egg are physical. And they create other physical things, and that's your body. So that is the beginning of your body. Fertilization, no doubt about it. We can prove it. Okay? What about the mind? Tibetan Buddhism says the body is the gross level of what they call a wind, like a life force. It also exists. We have subtle winds in the body. And then we have most subtle wind. The most subtle wind is what allows the fertilization to take place. It's like a life force. In the Tibetan system, in the Chinese system, they call it qi. Hindu, Ayurvedic system, they call it prana. Tibetan system, lung. Lung. L-U-N-G. Wind. Wind energy. Okay? It exists again on a gross level. This is a gross wind. You see my body rise. You hear it. Gross wind. Subtle wind. Most subtle winds allow it, the upward moving winds allow me to speak, turn my neck, chew food, speak, cry, blow my nose, breathe like that. Breathe at this part of my body. Downward voiding subtle winds allow me to walk and sit down and go to the bathroom and digest food and have a sexual orgasm. The reason your hair turns gray or white is because upward moving subtle winds are degenerating. It's a natural process that happens throughout life. It's the reason your eyes change. You can't see as well. It's the reason your knees hurt. Things like that. It's simply because subtle winds are degenerating. How does the mind get in there? The most subtle wind has a capacity to hold and host the most subtle mind, its clear light nature, which is not physical. So it's separate from the most subtle wind. It's separate from the body. Okay, but it has a way, most subtle mind, to mount the most subtle wind and to ride along inseparable, but different, for that life form. And then when they leave, when the most subtle wind leaves the body, after the body's died, most subtle mind is mounted on that, going into an in-between transition until it takes another form, based on the karmic seeds in that consciousness, in that mind, that are planted by previous activities in that life form. Activities of body, speech, and mind. Everybody following? Everybody with me? Feel free to ask any questions if you have. So you track back. That's the hardest part. So if you go back to conception, Tibetan Buddhism would say the mind is there at conception, again, mounted on the most subtle wind. And so there would be, if you notice the connectivity, and you can do a meditation on the continuum of consciousness that takes you back, realizing, oh, there is a connective. Everything has a preceding moment that caused it, and you may get back to your earliest childhood memory. Okay, so some of us have these early memories, 2 years old, 5 years old, doesn't matter, right? And then you go back and you say, well, what if you imagined? You noticed a connectivity with all these other little moments you can remember. And you say, yeah, there was a connection. Like my earliest memory is when I got out of my crib at like 2.5. I have a memory of that. And I have a memory of, from me reaching my hand through the bars, because I knew how to pop the lever, the pedal, and reaching for it, and then the one wall side would go down. But that was preceded by a moment of me knowing to put my hand through, preceded by a moment of mine that reached my hand out, that told my brain to, preceded by a moment of mine that started to move this, preceded by a moment where I sat up in the crib, preceded by, I can go all the way back to laying and waking up in the crib and having thoughts, I want to get out of the crib. See, all of that caused me to eventually put my hand and have the crib side go down. Is everybody following? Moments of consciousness. So then you go back, and for people that don't believe in reincarnation, which may be some of you, I didn't buy it in the beginning. I wasn't sure about reincarnation. Okay. So then I would go back and I would, if you say, what if you imagined being inside your mother as a fetus, being inside your mother? You just imagine. So all these other moments of mine have a preceding moment that caused it. Preceding cause. So what about inside my mother developing? The mind is there. There's going to be these causes as well, creating the development. Baby turns, the mother has something to eat, that effects goes through into the fetus, then there's a moment, then causes, preceding causes, like this. So, and does anybody in here, some people with reincarnation say, I don't remember any of my past lives, that's why I don't think it happened. Common, very common, normal. Right? Do you remember does anyone here remember being inside their mother? Okay, most people do not. Did it not happen? You don't remember that. So that for me, that was one of the things I was like, that's true. That's interesting. I don't remember being inside my mother. That happened. I have photos and proof, and my sister and brother saying that was you. This is what happened. Okay. That's when she was pregnant with you. Okay. So maybe then I started to think about maybe reincarnation. I don't remember the past lives, but could be possibility. That. So if you think that there's always a preceding cause, it indicates past lives, because there would be a preceding moment of mind to the moment of the most subtle mind at the moment of conception. Indicates past lives. So there is no beginning, there's no first life, because that first life where the mind is there, Tibetan Buddhism would say there would be moments before it, prior, that caused it. Moments before it that caused it. Okay, so we talk about beginningless mind. if you have beginningless mind, then you have had countless rebirths. In every rebirth, there's been a mother. So everyone's been your mother. Everyone has had that connection with you of being your mother at one time or another. So it starts to open up the heart area, that if you have that unique relationship. Now, it's not that everyone's mother of this life is great, but there's nothing quite like that mother love. Okay? So you slowly start to think of, and you can think about your father, you could think about others in your life, positive mentors, people that took care of you. So you have this connection with everybody on the planet. Strangers, enemies, have all at one time or another, the possibility exists that they've been my mother. So you slowly take your time to think about those. Okay? Step number 2. Does it make sense? Is everybody with me? Okay. Step number 2, remembering the kindness of your mother. Remembering the kindness. You may not have had a positive experience with your mother of this life. Okay? So you can reflect on somebody else. Your father, an aunt, grandmother, grandparent, someone else that took care of you. Think about the kindness, the sacrifices. You can think of other people's mothers. It's incredible, the kindness of the mother. First of all, 9 months inside. What they eat. I know friends that had quit smoking and they didn't drink anything, and the last month, and they can't do anything. They can't bend over and they can't do this, and they're tired all the time. Walking up steps is exhausting. They gained 40 to 80 pounds. It's unbelievable. So all the kindnesses, getting the baby out of you is a whole other thing. Okay? So think about the kindness of the mother. All the sacrifices, teaching you everything, cleaning you. You'd come into their room at night and throw up on them because you got sick. I did that to my mother once. That's really pleasant at 2 a.m, right? But that's what we did. That's what we did. The crying and the tantrums, and then you turn into a teenager, and then you're like the Wicked Witch of the West, like her daughter. Okay, it's intense what parents go through. Then the financial sacrifices. They wanted you to get an education, so all the things they did without, so you could get an education, and on and on. It goes. It's endless. It's endless. So you take some time to reflect, and then in a meditation, to slowly think about all the kindnesses. Think about, really deeply think of the kindness over and over, all the different kindnesses, slowly, soaking your mind in it. Okay? Next step, number 3, repaying the kindness. Repaying the kindness. How would you repay the kindness? You can get creative. They say if your old mother, blind mother, was wandering towards a cliff edge, you would rush over and help. So there's many kindnesses. My father is old now. I live with him. So many things I try to do for him to help. I'm always thinking of him. Like precede, like this, he's going to have difficulty with that. Like, are these the kind of foods I should cook? Does he need any special foods? Is he eating the foods okay? When I'm not there, preparing food so he can eat, getting him on outings so he gets outside. He's not outside much. How is he declining? What kind of support does he need? So the doctor's appointments, the different things, the different, how do you call it? Like things like walkers, getting those in place for him, paraphernalia that he could use to make it more comfortable for him, stuff that he doesn't think about because he's 90. Okay? So what might best benefit him? What might help him? What might he understand to do? When does he want to be left alone? Like sometimes that's also, you can't keep bothering somebody. Leave them, let him just do his life. But then he needs a little bit more support. So you can think of many creative ways to repay the kindness, regardless of whatever age your parents are. Incredible. It's really about, and I've been in some ways with my mind, I think I'm a very selfish person mostly, but I notice with my dad how much I think about him. More than myself. Like I'll think, oh no, I'm not going to go to that thing today because I know he might want to do that in the afternoon. That would be good for him. So I'm kind of like, it's interesting. There is a little bit of the opening here. Caring like that. Number 4 is a little bit reversing the idea of all beings have been your mother. What if they're all your children? Okay? So the way we feel about our kids is we love our kids. You just want them to be happy. So a little bit turning the tables, reflecting on all living beings as if they've been your child, and you just want them to be happy. Just want them to be happy. That kind of endearing attraction you have to your kids. Now, some of you haven't had kids, doesn't matter. But that endearing attraction, we've been around kids, of wishing, I have a niece and nephews, and when they're sick, I'd rather be sick than have them sick. Like I really want to change places. Just really want to celebrate. I hear about stuff that they're doing, and I'm just like, I just really want them to succeed. I really want them to be happy. That love you feel for all beings, as if they've been your children. Next step, the Mahakaruna, great compassion, Mahakaruna, generating a very strong wish that all beings be free of suffering. Generating this strong wish, all beings be free of suffering. The last step, the 6th point, is the altruistic intention. The altruistic intention is, I take responsibility for trying to release them from their suffering. I'm going to live my life that way. I'm going to direct my life with my body, speech, and mind as much as I can towards living a life that is going to consider the best way that I can show up to relieve others' suffering. Altruistic motivation. And that results in bodhichitta, according to the 6-point cause and effect method from Master Serlingpa. The second method was secret from Master Shantideva, called equalizing and exchanging self with others. Again, on a basis of equanimity, because the equalizing, so that would be the first part, equalizing. Okay? So they say there's 5 steps to this. First would be equanimity. Number 2 and 3 are related. 2 would be reflecting on the disadvantages of cherishing yourself. 3 would be reflecting on the advantages of cherishing others. Those are pretty easy to understand, but they list them specifically in the Lamrim books, especially the detailed ones. And they'll say things like, cherishing yourself just creates suffering for you. You don't accomplish any of your spiritual activities. You displease the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I mean, it makes sense. What I would check is, thank you very much. What I would check is how much you're, when you're not happy, just in general, something comes up, a little thorn, rears its head. What's going on in your mind? If you can catch it, what's going on in your mind? Are you thinking about yourself or are you thinking about others? Thinking about yourself or thinking about others? You're not going to be practiced to catch it all the time. So what I do is, that's why I have a meditation practice. And later in the day, I sit back on the cushion and I'll think, oh yeah, early around lunchtime, something happened, I wasn't happy. What happened? So and then you kind of go, oh, well, they only had so many of those sandwiches left. And I saw that one with the big mushroom sticking out that looked really juicy and great, but that other woman took it. And then I wasn't happy. And I kind of thought she pushed her way into the tea area before I did, and then took the cookie that I wanted. And so I'm. So, but this happens for people. I'm giving you a mundane example, but this happens a lot. I'm kind of, and then I realize it's just all about me. Why did I need to have that sandwich and the cookie? Why couldn't I just think about it, making an offering, stepping back for a moment, letting other people? No, because it was me. You insinuate yourself in these things, then the suffering starts. So just check how it works. Okay. So you see all the disadvantages when you think of yourself. The reverse would be the advantages. The advantages. When you feel spacious. And, I've been on this tour. I left Philadelphia April 14th. When was that? It was a while ago, April 14th. And I knew I had a month. I was not going to be back for a month. So I've been in many different beds since then. Some of them have been great. Some have not been so great. Okay. So here so what are you going to do? It's awkward. And somebody apologized to me the other day about this bed setup and things like that. And it wasn't really that adequate, but the whole situation was fine. And then at first I noticed a little, like, in my mind, like, this isn't okay. This isn't okay for me. A little, and then I went like, wait a minute. all the effort. They go through all the thing. I understood the situation. What am I going to do? Make a snit there and upset the whole household? It doesn't make sense. So once I just relaxed and went like, watch the little bubble come up, let it go, and went, how do we make the best of this situation? Right? And we did. It was fun. It wasn't any problem. Everybody's happy that way. I was happy. Not a problem. Okay, so you can always adjust. Doesn't always work. It's not easy all the time with things. Now this again doesn't mean that you don't set clear boundaries or that you become a codependent again. You know when you've tipped over into the wrong area. You know, if something is in the face of social injustice, bodhisattvas have a responsibility to respond, to act. If you care to, you try to think up, you see something going on, and there's a thing in your mind that says, what should I do? I see this thing, I'm uncomfortable now in the face of this. What can I do? Okay, and then quickly have a little assessment. When you see something, have an assessment. What can I do? You see, we drive a lot. There's lots of traffic. Sometimes you see somebody broken down or they need something. Then you have an assessment. Should I help? I can call. So then have your list. I can call 911 right now from my phone. I can stop. I can assess. I see somebody else stopping. Okay, I'm deciding not to stop, but I'm going to call 911. I'm late. I'm in a rush. I can't stop. You know, so I'll do this. There's many things you can do. So then you have a responsibility to act. You do your best. But the thing is, what's your motivation when you act? Bodhisattvas would act from compassionate wisdom. Has to come from compassionate wisdom. So being a codependent and allowing the alcoholic to drink and allowing the abuser to perpetuate negative behavior and allowing somebody to act out at work in a rageful way is not okay. It's not okay. So you kind of find the proper time, take them aside quietly if you have that perspective, or get people from the office to intervene. We need to have a meeting about them. This is really unhealthy. It's not working. Go to your boss. Go to somebody over their head. Write letters. Find the channels to do it. So people want to stand up at this time in the country and protest. So some people have gotten more politically active in the last few months. It's your choice. Some people don't feel to do that. Okay? There's some people I know, and they make calls every week to their different representatives, if you'd like. They have a little thing of what they want to do. They call, they let it go. Okay, but what's your motivation for doing it? Do you call in anger and hatred? Do you go to the protest with disconnection and hatred and anger? You know, hating somebody, yelling about somebody? Or do you go with love and connection? Right? I've been to protest. I call my representatives. There's 5 of them. All but 1 of them are conservative. So I have a lot of work to do in the state that I'm living in. And I call them almost every week. And I have my little script I read, depending what's going on. That's what I feel like I can do. Doesn't take much of my time. You know, I worked in politics, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with politics because you see, it just cycles around. It's the same garbage all the time, okay? So I vote, I do what I can do, and I have a right to call my representatives because I vote, right? I didn't vote for them, but but as a result, I can speak up. I'm a constituent. I live in their town. I went, stood outside one of their offices with a placard. I'm allowed to do that. That's the freedom we have in the States. It's a beautiful freedom to have because other countries don't have that. You can do that. You can speak. I'm an American. I have a citizen. I have a passport from this country. I am allowed to express myself. So I do it, but I do it with love and connection and compassion and I call, and sometimes I call them and I thank them for something good that they did. I thank them. So they're not always getting the negativity, like please vote like this. That's important. It's about creating healthy relationships. You do your best, and then I let it go. I don't obsess about it. I don't get into. People tried to draw me in. This is horrible, horrible. People were sending me links. Buddhist practitioners, long-term practitioners, were sending me these links of awful negative things about some politicians. Like, that's what you have time to put in your mind? I don't have time for that. I'm not interested. Somehow I got on somebody's routing list. How special, how wonderful. Please don't put me on any routing lists. But it was this vindictive stuff. I'm not interested in that. Why do that? It divides people. So think about how you want to respond. No problem. Write your letters, call people, Do it with positivity. There's a positive way to do it. And we're allowed to disagree, but, have a nice foundation underneath. So you just look at the disadvantages of cherishing self, advantages of cherishing others. Okay? Number 3 step. Number three and this is actually the 4th and 5th step of equalizing and exchanging self with others. These are the harder steps, which is why this method was secret. It was a secret teaching. So number 4 is you do the exchange, exchanging yourself with others. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you turn into someone else. Okay? It's an attitude. It's an attitude. How much time, what percentage would you say of your day, what percentage do you spend thinking about yourself and doing things for yourself? Roughly. Any guess? What would you say? What percentage? Take a guess. Anybody. There's no right answer. It's your own mind. How much time do you devote to yourself, thinking about yourself, focused on yourself?
Almost 100%.
Almost 100%. It's pretty honest, I'd say. So imagine if you took a half of that, 50%, tried to focus it on others through the day. Okay, this is an exercise for your mind. Please try to do that. It's very interesting how it works. Please try to do that. I'm going to take like half my time. It's very hard to do. It's very hard to do. Yeah. Could you just say, I'm going to have a ride home after this. My whole ride home, I'm going to try to focus on other people's cars and how they're driving. And I'm going to pay attention while I'm driving, but I'm very much going to be thinking about here comes a guy who wants to get in. Let me, thinking about sending love to them. And you go home and maybe you interact with somebody. You're in a restaurant. Do you ever think about them first? Right. Really interesting exercise. Okay. So exchanging. So it's a little bit of what's their experience. Let's say you're having a fight with someone. Anybody have a difficult situation this week with somebody? Past week? And you're having a fight with somebody. Okay? So there they are, and this could be the next week coming up. There's somebody you don't like in your office? Anybody? Some difficult people in your office? Okay. Everybody's like, hello, right? So you have a difficult person in your office. Did you ever for a moment think, what's their experience? No, I don't like them. I want them out of my picture. I don't like this person. I'm uncomfortable. They're a jerk. He's stupid. They always do this to irritate me. They're in a power trip. They never want to help anybody. They make all the money. They have the bigger office. I mean, it goes on and on. It's endless. What's their experience? For bosses, it's very lonely at the top. Having been a boss, it's lonely at the top. Nobody really understands what you're doing in the position. They think they do, but they don't know what it's like holding the responsibility, being worried at night about the finances and everything else. That people don't like you, that people are leaving, that there's a transition and a turnover all the time. It's exhausting like that. So and then you have a fight with somebody, you have a disagreement. Did you ever check, what did you think their motivation was? No, I'm just concerned about myself. Do you know much about them? What motivates them? Do you know their mind? So it's a little bit of looking out through their eyes. And we have the expression in our culture, put yourself in someone else's shoes. So it's like that. Really look out through their eyes. What is it like standing across from you when you're angry? What is that like? Fun? Right? Not fun. So exchanging oneself with others. The last step is Tonglen meditation. Tonglen meditation. We're going to do that right now. Then we're going to take a short break. So just sit comfortably. If you want to just stand up and just for a second, if you need to stretch your body, just stand up. Have a little stretch. Tonglen, as you're stretching, I'll just mention, it's radical. The reason it's radical is the essence of it is Tonglen means taking and giving. taking and giving. Okay? So what are we taking? We're taking the suffering from other beings. It also could be yourself. Depends how you visualize. There's variations of Tonglen meditation. You're giving them your happiness. So if you want to leave here and go out and start telling people this is what they're doing in the Buddhist center, I would really temper it, because this is a higher level teaching, Tonglen. So people don't, if they don't have the basis, they don't understand. You want to take their suffering? Why would you want to do that? You know, it's a process to understand how to open your heart. Okay, but again, it's built on many steps. And to give away your happiness, why would you want to do that? You know, it makes you happier. But if somebody doesn't understand Buddhism and doesn't have any premise of it, they'll misunderstand. Okay? So let's just sit comfortably. You find your way into the comfortable posture for the body. And allow the mind to settle on the breath. Imagine in the space in front, seated across from you, is an exact replica of yourself. And just take a moment to look over at this replica of yourself facing you. Just visualize as best as you can. And just think about the ways you suffer and generate, as much as you can, a wish that you be free of this suffering. So as you seated here in the room, inhale. Imagine inhaling through your right nostril all the suffering from your front generation that leaves through the left nostril of that visualization, in whatever images represent suffering to you. Could be images of war and poverty, environmental toxins, words like hatred and divisiveness, different colored light rays, animals that can kill you, poisonous plants that can kill you. Comes in through your right nostril, you seated here in the room. It does not harm you at all, but at your heart center, at the core of your being, is a constricted knot of all of your self-cherishing. and it goes and eliminates that. It goes right there to the heart center, diminishing your selfishness, your self-absorption. It forms again and again, and we continue to purify. And as you purify from a space of deeper peace and happiness, I offer out my left nostril as I exhale all the images of that to the front visualization of myself. All the goodness, all the happiness, and it enters them through the right nostril, bringing them this deep sense of happiness and peace. The happiness can also manifest in whatever images, words represent happiness to you. Could be colored light rays. All the love you've ever experienced. Taking and giving. You can mount it on your breath as you inhale and exhale. Taking the suffering, offering the happiness. Just do so with the front visualization of yourself as best as you can. So just allow the front visualization of yourself to stay there. Take the practice focus off of them. And imagine now to your side, seated next to you, facing the same direction as you, are any members of your family, even if they passed away. Thinking about their suffering, generating a wish they be free of the suffering and have happiness. Do this Tonglen practice with all of them. Just focused on them right now. And taking the focus off of them, imagine in the space behind you, seated in a semicircle, same direction as you, are your friends and people you like. Your friends and the people you like, think about their suffering, generating a wish they be free of suffering. And do this Tonglen practice now, just focused on all of them. And just taking the focus off of them, place in the space in front of you now, seated to one side of the front visualization of yourself, place somebody who is more challenging. You may consider them an enemy, somebody you have difficulty with, who harms you or may have harmed you, who interferes with your agenda. Just place one person, considering their suffering, generating a wish they be free of the suffering and have happiness. And just focused on them, do this Tonglen practice with them. Taking their suffering, letting it purify, eliminate, decrease your self-cherishing at your heart center, offering them your happiness. And just taking the focus off the enemy, place on the other side of the front visualization of yourself someone you would consider a stranger. So you may know their first name, but you don't know much else about them or have an opinion one way or another about them. And do this Tonglen practice with them. And now consider all these beings we just visualized together. Front visualization of yourself, your family, friends and people you like, the enemy, the stranger, and do this Tonglen practice with all of them together now. And imagine adding to the visualization are all the people in this room. Just let them fill up the other space in your visualization, continuing the Tonglen practice. And considering all the people in California right now, just adding them, imagining the space filling with all of these beings as far as you can imagine, and do the practice with all of these beings together. And just trying to open the heart, mind wide open. Imagine all beings all over the universe, all over this planet, filling all the rest of the visualization, doing this practice with all of these beings, taking their suffering, offering them happiness. And slowly imagine all of these beings happier, more peaceful. So even if we feel they are not, and there's still conflict on the planet, we are part of the world, and we've sent out these ripples of happiness, relief from suffering from here. Definitely has some effect on the planet in a positive way. Just imagine them released from their suffering, ultimately happy. And allow all these beings to dissolve back into the space from where they came, leaving you and the front visualization of yourself. Look across at yourself. Imagine yourself, the front visualization, lighter, freer. Feel free to acknowledge in any way you like yourself. And allow that front visualization to dissolve from the edges of the visualization to the center into a golden drop of light. And allow the drop to come to your crown, slowly dissolving into you, melting into your heart. And just have some faith. You have definitely decreased some of your self-cherishing just by the nature of this meditation. And may any merit we've created from doing this practice help us to generate this wide open heart-mind experience of loving kindness and compassion, helping us to become Buddhas as quickly as possible, to reach that highest manifestation of ourselves, fully awake, so we can be unlimited in benefiting all others. Please relax. You can slowly open your eyes. We're going to take a 10-minute break, And I'd like to just stay in silence. So just reflect a little bit, anything that bubbled up for you in the meditation. Feel free to have a cup of tea. And we'll come back in 10 minutes. Thank you.